I'm Jim Monaghan. I'm the content coordinator for Red Sox Life, and welcome to another Red Sox Life staff Zoom. I have James and Eric, two of our writers with us, and let's get to it. We've got the American League Championship Series between the Boston Red Sox, of course, and the Houston Astros. James, I'll ask you first, how did we get here? Because about a month ago, this did not seem even remotely possible.
Right. I think you have to start with the offense. And, Boston just got clicking at the right time of year, especially once you get in. Anything can happen, especially when you have the talent of Devers and Bogarts and Martinez. Once you get into the playoffs, then the potential is there to do what they're doing. So, New York, they got past New York, which was a big step, especially how well New York played against them in the second half of the year. And then once they got to Tampa, again, the offense just kind of took over. And then you got some huge performances from the starting pitching with Pivetta and Houck and Eovaldi. So I think people are surprised, but I think at the same time, they've kind of underrated the talent that's there. And you're seeing it start to come together now with the offense and some of the performances from the starting pitching. So it's been fun. It's been exciting. And they have a real shot here of competing and winning this whole thing. So, yeah, it's been fun to watch.
Eric, I'll ask you because I'm here down in the New York City area, so I hear about the big bad Yankees all the time. Their manager, Aaron Boone, said that he felt that other teams had closed the gap. And, that's the perspective that I have a lot of times because the Yankees, and how great they are in the payroll and the offensive numbers that they're capable of putting up. But in looking back on it, I don't know that we should have been surprised that the Yankees fell to the Red Sox in that wild card game. I think it's more case, never mind a gap being closed. I think the Yankees have fallen behind.
Yeah, I think, anything can happen in a wild card game. So you're always sitting there with your fingers crossed and praying that everything's going to work out, right? All you need is a couple of cold hitters for one day and you're done. But we talked about it last time I was on this thing, how we think the Yankees are not going to catch us and all that kind of stuff because they built that team around power hitting, on the balls that fly, on pitchers with sticky stuff. And when all that got taken away, when they put the mush ball out this year, when they took away you saw the perfect games, or what was it, the no-hitters that were being thrown by all these old crafty pitchers, right? Guys that could manipulate the ball and place it. So they weren't getting any fly balls that are getting past the warning track kind of stuff. And I think that the Yankees were absolutely built that way. They still are until they fix it. And they never played contact baseball. They never played executing when you need to get a single. If you watch the Houston Astros, which you'd be mightily scared of, they're really good at that, right? They don't need to mash it out of the park. They put the ball in play all the time. And the Red Sox basically did exactly the same thing at the beginning of the season. You saw them win all kinds of stuff, rush up in the standings. You were like, wow, it's all clicking, and the pitching overachieved. And I think we got where we're at now to be really honest, we're walking a tightrope with the bullpen. And it's been fantastic when Houck was clicking, but when Houck wasn't clicking, you know what I mean? You have these days where one's clicking and then Robles is not clicking. And so if that tightrope walking by Corda continues to work, we could go all the way. But, it's kind of hard to sit here like this all the time, hoping it's all going to go right.
Yeah. Agree. And you think you just mentioned the bullpen. The biggest concern that I have right now is Chris Sale, because if Sale can't go deep, this bullpen is going to start getting overworked. James, what do you think we can expect from Chris Sale, who they have said, the Red Sox have said he's going to start in the ALCS? What do you think we can expect from Sale?
Well, I think he's the X factor in the series, honestly. And when you look at it on paper, Houston, they mash right-handers, but they especially mash left-handers. So it's not technically a great matchup. But outside of Eovaldi, they need somebody else to step up. It was Erod in the last round against Tampa. He was awesome in that game against Tampa, and they needed that type of performance because, the starting pitching, outside Eovaldi, there's some question marks there. So I think he's a huge X factor, and I think if they, especially with McCullers out now, if they could get anything out of Chris, it would be massive in terms of them advancing past Houston. Then you also look at the bullpen. I know that's been a concern, but the way you kind of mitigate that is you get bulk innings from your starting pitching. And that's why Pivetta was so big, and that's why Houck was so big. So we have a bunch of questions in the bullpen, but you didn't really see it because we got such great performances from some of our starting pitching outside of the rotation. We put them in the bullpen, just like 2018. When you can get those starting pitching and you put them in the bullpen, you can get bulk innings. It kind of mitigates those bullpen questions. So Sale is going to be massive in this series, and I honestly think he's the X factor. If they can get anything out of him, then Boston has a really good chance of advancing.
Eric, I know you work with a lot of young pitchers. What's your take on what happened with Chris Sale, especially the last couple of starts?
I mean, we tend to forget really quickly he's coming back from the Tommy John, and one, you're not going to torch it. You heard if you watch the news a little bit, you heard Chaim Bloom and Henry were saying, "Hey, we're ahead of schedule, right?" The plan is a little bit longer term than right now, and Cora wasn't going to blow him up, wasn't going to risk him, wasn't going to use him out of the bullpen kind of thing. Said he was, but didn't. I think he's going to have a super short leash. I think they're going to be watching every pitcher that way, either way. Nobody's going to go deep. I don't think we had a pitcher go beyond 5, did we?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, it's like a standard thing. So you have to use the bullpen, but how he uses the bullpen is completely different than the normal season. So you don't really have to worry about super tired bullpen because they have half starters or full starters sitting out there, which is what they did with Pivetta, what they did with Houck, basically a starter, right? He's been stretched out long enough to go 4 innings if he needs to. But how many times can you do that in a 7-game series? And you need some of those relievers to step it up, it's you're rolling the dice. Everybody's tired. Everybody's been used a lot. Everybody's seen everybody. I call it walking the tightrope. I keep tweeting about that, and I think that's what it feels like to me. It's like hold your breath every time one comes in.
James, you mentioned Chris Sale being the X factor. There are 2 X factors I can think of in the bullpen. One, Martin Perez, and the other is Matt Barnes. And both, I have concerns about both, although I do have a little bit more trust in Matt Barnes. Do you even see either of those 2 being a factor in this series, or do you think that it'll be a case of Alex Cora not using them until he absolutely has to?
Right. So it's interesting with Perez because he didn't pitch, I don't think at all against Tampa, but when you look at the season series against Houston, he was the only starting pitcher that we had who actually performed well. Eovaldi got rocked, and so did one of our other starters against Houston. So Perez, actually, I think this would be a good matchup for him to kind of infiltrate him into the series. And then Barnes, I mean, he was awesome in the first half, and in the second half, he's just completely disappeared. And you just think of the performances that Boston's had out of some of their young guys like Houck and Whitlock. And imagine if they had Barnes on top of that, it would change his bullpen. But because he hasn't been the same, it's really handcuffed Cora as far as who he can trust. So I think Perez, this might be a good matchup for him to get back in. And then Barnes, I honestly have no idea. I wouldn't trust him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's not even on the ALCS roster, to be honest with you.
And Eric, to go back to something we were talking about with Sale, and you mentioned, he's coming back obviously from Tommy John surgery. I think another factor in that is that basically nobody had a full season last year with just the 60-game schedule. And I'm wondering how much of a factor, and we acknowledge everybody's tired at this time of year to begin with, but how much of a factor of going from a full schedule to a 60-game schedule back to a full game schedule, how much of that is adding to the fatigue?
That's a really good question. I don't think we're seeing massive amounts of fatigue because of that. I do think that everybody's playing with something by now, whether you're so damn silly you can't run out to your position without falling over second base and twisting your ankle. If that's not on MLB's funny reel, what the hell? But everybody's got something going on, right? I mean, who isn't sore, but who gives a crap, right? You're in the postseason, and this is where it's all about. How many guys have you seen flying into the walls in these other series? I'm just amazed, right? Going into the dugouts, all kinds of crazy stuff to get into the postseason here. So I don't think that's really the deal. I think it's more into your bullpen, into the arms. How much are they throwing? How much have they thrown? I know they try to give him rest. I know they try to give him, how many times did Martin Perez stand up in the bullpen and warm up? He probably threw as many pitches as anybody else in the game. I looked it up really quick, by the way, and he did really well in 7.2 innings the first time around, but he came back around to Houston the second time, got rocked in 2 innings and was gone. So they figured him out. I have zero confidence in that guy. I don't want to see Richards either, unless it's a really short, nice matchup of 3 guys and then get him out. He's so hit and miss, coming out of the bullpen. He can give length, okay, but he's the kind of guy you want to bring in when the game's gone. Just let somebody eat the innings and you don't have to sweat it. They need to do what they've done so far and keep that average of 6.1 runs a game. If that shit's not clicking, then I think we're going to have a bit of a problem.
And of course, it's not lost on anybody, or should not be, that Chaim Bloom was the architect of both the Rays and now the Red Sox. And I think what you saw were two teams kind of mirror images of one another. Eric, you had mentioned earlier about the way the Yankee lineup has been put together over, what seems like forever. The Red Sox are younger, they're more athletic, they're versatile, which very, very much mirrors Tampa Bay. And what gets me, and I'll pose this to both of you, James and Eric, Tampa Bay has pretty much given us the blueprint of how to build a team. And even, wherever they have, how much money they have, obviously they went out and got Nelson Cruz this year. So they spent that kind of money when they saw they had a chance there. But for the most part, it's draft, develop, and then they get too expensive, you can move on. Now, the Red Sox wouldn't have to worry about that because they are a bigger market team. But it stuns me sometimes that more teams haven't looked at this and going, wow, there's the blueprint. Let's match it with our own business model. James, I'm stunned that more teams like the Yankees, who had that brief spurt for a while with some more youthful and more athletic players in the middle of the season, as soon as the other guys got healthy, right back to Joey Gallo and his 190 average. And just that mess of, it's either hit or miss with the offense.
Right. And if you pay attention to what Chaim said since the beginning of the year, he's always talking about sustainability, right? So when, like you mentioned, Jim, when you build a roster through the draft, through developing players, through players who can play more than one position, it's sustainable. And then you look at the opposition where the Yankees, the way they built their roster, I mean, the guys over there have regressed and they've actually gotten worse. And now they're in turmoil. Who knows what direction they're headed in? So I agree 1,000%. I love Chaim Bloom. He's my favorite GM in all of sports just because I love his mindset and where, you have a Tampa Bay where they don't have much money, and then you have the Red Sox with the resources that we have. You should be able to have the best of both worlds. And then you have, something like the Dodgers have, where you have the payroll, but then you also have the homegrown farm system. You can contend year in and year out. And honestly, this was not even the year they were built to compete. If you look at the way Chaim signed, Kike was a 2-year, Hunter Renfroe, we have control over him past this year, but it was really a 1-year deal. Garrett Richards was all these short term because this wasn't really the year. And yet all these guys, he still signed guys who performed well, and now we're ahead of schedule. And then now you look at next year, some of the farm system, the way they've developed this year, it's really exciting to be a Red Sox fan right now. And a lot of that is because of Chaim and his mindset and the way he's built this roster. So I 1,000% agree. And I think it's only up from here with Chaim Bloom at the head.
And Eric, I don't know if you saw the end of the game. I think it was the wild card game with the Yankees where Cora handed Bloom the lineup card for that game. When
I saw that.
The celebration. That clip, yeah. I thought that was very, very fitting because obviously the guy who put the team together. And I was looking at an email that I got, and we were talking before we came on about the Olympic team. Let me see if I can find it here. It's from Baseball America. Standouts from day one of the Arizona Fall League. And it'll be hard to see this here, but that's Tristan Casas.
Yeah.
That's his picture. And I mean, what an Olympic series he had. And there's another young kid, Eric, who's on the horizon and could very well make an impact in 2022.
Yeah, I also hope they're going to bring some of the arms up, right? You've been waiting and waiting and waiting for those younger arms to come up through the system, right? When is Howe going to get put into the rotation? When is, the next two that are behind him? One of the pitchers is down there right now, also in the fall league, I believe. Yeah, I don't know. That seems to me one of the biggest things that I think we're going to see quite a turnover in the pitching staff this year. They have to do something beyond Eovaldi and Sale, and I think Rodriguez. I don't know what they're going to do with him. Right? I think he's a free agent this year.
Yeah.
So what do you bank this or do you not bank this? I don't know what they're going to do with this, and that's a question mark based on what Bloom's going to say about stats and all that other stuff when we look at the baseball ops. They think they can fix something, but I expect probably not. So.
Well, to close here, as we head into the American League Championship Series with the Red Sox and the Houston Astros, James, you just said it. The Red Sox are ahead of schedule. How do you think this series plays out?
I think it's going to be very competitive. And I think if you look at the matchups on paper, Houston is stacked. It's a juggernaut. I mean, not only is that lineup 1 through 9 really tough to navigate through, but they have the arms as well. And if you looked at Tampa, they had the arm talent, but a lot of those young guys didn't have experience in the postseason. And you saw that come to fruition, and they weren't able to compete at the level the Red Sox were. You know, Houston has just as many young arms, but they have the postseason experience. You know, Valdez was awesome in the postseason last year, and they were 1 game away from the World Series. So I think Houston is absolutely stacked on paper. They just have more talent and arms than Boston does. So at first I was leaning towards Houston, but with this news of McCullers being out, it's massive. And I'm going with Boston in 6.
Wow.
I think it's a huge loss for Houston. And I think with him out, with the way the Red Sox are hitting right now, it's going to be overwhelming for Houston. I don't think they'll be able to keep the bats quiet enough. And I think we'll see some performance. I think Sale does come through. I think he does perform. And I think Boston wins it in 6.
Eric, same question. How do you think this series plays out?
That's a really good one.
That's why we're here.
It's all economics, right? So it's going to be 7 games so everybody can get maximum revenue out of these stadiums, right? That's what I think is going to happen magically. It should also, I mean, the farther you go in the postseason, come on, these games should go almost 7 every time. So 6 or 7 sounds about right to me. I think it's going to be, I mean, I have to say Red Sox. I'm hoping and praying Red Sox, of course, but I either way, I hope we have a good series because it's going to be, it should be really fun, right? That's the better it gets and the higher they perform and the more fun it is to watch for me anyway. So
I'll be the contrarian. I agree. I think it's going to go deep. I think it's 6 games. I think it's going to be Houston. And I agree the team is ahead of schedule. So even if they don't get to the World Series, everything they've done this year to me has been just marvelous. I enjoyed obviously the way it started, the way they came back from that mess of August, fought through COVID and everything else. I think what they've done just leads you to believe that the future for this team is very, very bright. So James,
I got one more question for you guys. How about this? We'll flip this around here, Jimbo. I want to ask you guys what you think on the other side of the fence. Say we do get through to the World Series. Who do you want to meet and why?
James, you go first.
I would much rather see San Francisco. I think the Dodgers, with the arms they have with Scherzer and Urias and Walker Buehler, I mean, they're stacked as well, especially with that lineup. I'm rooting for San Francisco tonight, but I don't see that happening. But if the Red Sox can get past Houston, and if I feel like if it's not the Dodgers, then we have a real shot of actually winning a title this year. If it's LA, then we gotta start praying now because that team is awesome. But I'm rooting for San Francisco, but I think the Dodgers win that game tonight.
I'll agree with you on that. So on behalf of Eric and James, I'm Jim Monaghan. Thank you for reading Red Sox Life, and go Red Sox in this series.